The lost wax casting of the American, A Monument to Courage, starts with a silicone mold being made over the original clay of the final prototype of the sculpture. The artist Shan Gray shipped the original clay of the sculpture to us to begin the molding process. Many layers of silicone must be applied to build up the thickness of the mold. As the many sections of the original sculpture arrive, they have to be carefully unwrapped and molded. The final molds will be approximately 1/8 inch thick. Each coating must be carefully applied. We will then divide the larger sections of the sculpture into smaller parts, which are divided for casting purposes.
What we'll do is we'll put a strip of silicone and then we'll cut playing cards out to create a shim and to create kind of a plane, if you will, along the edges, and that will create 4 separate molds. So one here on top, the top front, the top back, the bottom front, and the bottom back.
Once we finish the silicone that is completed over the entire Indian and all the pieces of the Indian, for instance, the eagle, the arm, are both molded separately. So these will be fit back together as it's completed. And as well as these 2 pieces, we have the blanket that has to be molded separately and put it back in place. Each of the strands of hair, if you look at the original maquette, the strands of hair that are around the Indian are going to be molded and added separately when the cast is complete. So we will have separate molds for the hair, the arm, the eagle, the blanket, and many of the parts that fit back together to put this American back together. Not unlike the original maquette, you'll notice the blanket has been added to this version from the original maquette. So the blanket will be added to each of the casts from here on out. Once we have the mold finished, we will create a mother mold over the silicone. The silicone is very flexible, so a mother mold made out of plaster is created over the silicone mold. The mold is done in such a way where it comes apart. As was described earlier, this mold will be cut and separated so that we have parts that fit together. From this mold, the parts then of the American will be poured into wax. So we will have a wax version identical to some of the pieces that you're seeing now. The wax is then taken and a ceramic shell is created over the wax. The ceramic shell is built up again in about 7 coatings so that you have a ceramic shell. Gating, these little pieces of bronze that you're seeing here, are added to the shell as you built it up, added to the wax and to the shell. And then once you have the 7 coatings in place, the ceramic shell is fired till it's about as hard as a plate. Well, of course, as soon as the shell is fired, the wax melts out. Hence, lost wax process. And bronze is poured into the areas vacated by the wax. When you're finished, you have a ceramic shell with the bronze inside it. So the ceramic shell is then broken away and cleaned up so that you end up with a bronze that has all the ceramic shell removed. These are the eagles, and of course these are the eagles from the original maquette, smaller than the eagle we'll be doing on this, but the process is identical. This will be cast just like that, gatings will be added, and these gates all have to be cut away. And then every place where a gate was, that has to be chased out so that the eagle is perfect. So artists work on all this process to remove the eagle from the gating and then weld it back in place to the American. All these pieces have to be welded back together. So we're going to end up with this 30 or 40 pieces welded back on the American, chased out, and then the coloring is added, the patina. All the patinization has to be done under the instruction of the artist. Shan Gray has determined the coloring that he would like on this final version. The coloring of the 3.5 foot will be a little different than the coloring on the original maquette. And Shan is working now on the contrast that he wants between light and dark for the hair and the eagle and the body of the Indian. The Indian on the 3.5 foot and all the larger versions will be mounted on a walnut base. There will be a large wood base rather than the marble that we used on the original maquette for the final version. We will end up with this beautiful version of the American, and as we build up from the 3.5 foot to the 6 foot to the 12 foot, 18 foot, and into the 217 foot version for the final American cast. Okay, this is the raw cast back from casting, and so far we have joined the upper torso with the legs and that weld. But just to give you an idea of all the pieces involved in putting this back together, we have the braid will have to be welded on, the hand and the blanket that will go over the arm and down will have to be welded on, and then all these places where the gating was must be chased out and made to look totally natural. The arm, of course, will be welded back on here with the eagle mounted on the arm, and the eagle is still quite heavy. The eagle is cast solid, so there's a lot of weight in the eagle itself. This must weigh 8 to 9 pounds, I would guess. So we have a lot of weight, so that you can imagine the welding, everything has to be done really well to do that. Then we have the hair, and just to give you an idea of the complexity of this is all pieces of hair that must be welded in place. So there's probably, 8 pieces of hair that has to be welded on as we complete the rough casting of this piece. Then all the chasing has to be done, and then the patinization has to be done to give it the proper color, polishing of certain areas, highlighting certain points of the American, and then of course mounted on a wood base for completion.